the de-influencing trend is there for a reason. I think it's showing, just generally speaking, where we as a consumer are paying more and more attention to, and that is the hyper consumerism. Same on the brand side. Of course, no one likes more ads. That is, I think, universally understood. So how can we make that more seamless, more integrated? That is a big question. I think the opportunity lies also in the way we're sharing the formats or how we're integrating it. Think about your favorite TV show that's running on Netflix or Hulu, whichever program you like, Amazon Prime, but like giving people the option rather than having to shove it into their faces, so to speak. Giving them the option to, hey, if you really like something you see while it's streaming, yes, you can click pause. And if you would like to click pause, maybe you would also like to purchase, but maybe you don't like it. So maybe let's just move on with the movie or your favorite series. I think that's sort of the way we're going, but just being more creative about that and more mindful.
Welcome to Up Next in Tech, a podcast exploring the intersection of emerging technology, responsible innovation, and the way we live, play, and interact. I'm your host, Ariba Jahan, and this podcast is essentially a reflection of my curiosity about how new industries are created and how emerging technology plays a role, and how new careers and new skills get shaped. So on every episode, I bring on a guest that I'm deeply inspired by. We dive into how they got started because the careers they have today did not exist 10 years ago. And we unpack the nascent industry that they're working in, as well as the emerging tech that they're building or utilizing. We get into the tension they might be grappling with or where they're finding inspiration. In this episode, I sit down with Jessica Berger, who leads innovation and strategy at Publicis Media by harnessing the power of emerging technologies and insights. She has an industry-wide reputation for her unwavering enthusiasm and understanding of cutting-edge tech, like Web3, AI, augmented reality, as well as virtual reality. What sparked this conversation is I recently saw her post on LinkedIn this AI-generated video to promote the trends report her team put out. I loved the video, thought it was playful. I dug into the report and really enjoyed it and thought this could be a fun conversation. I invited Jessica to join us, and that's what we talk about on this episode. You'll hear us mention the 4 different trends in the report, but we dig deep into 2 specifically. So the 4 trends are instant content to commerce, especially in this live stream economy, immersive digital ecosystems, AI being at the crossroads of identity and social life, and how gaming's evolution is catalyzing brands' revolution. We also get into her definition of innovation and how she nurtures her curiosity. So check out the episode and let us know, which trend are you most interested about? Would you use a digital twin? I'm curious. Check it out. Can't wait to hear from you. Jessica, I am so excited that we're finally doing this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. Long overdue. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I think what was super cool was when I first realized you've had so many unique experiences. You've studied in Japan, you have a background in language, but you work in digital innovation. And those are not the typical dots people might connect. And I would love to hear, how did you end up working in innovation?
The diverse background, the randomness of it all is sort of actually serving in my favor, like many others. When I went to college back in the day, back then, digital marketing the way we know it today was not available. And marketing back then felt very boring. So I did something entirely different, traveled quite a bit and explore the world, spent some time in Japan, like you mentioned. That was a good time for me to explore and see what else is out there. And then ultimately, as social media came of age and became something that you could actually tangibly conceptualize and make use of, I started working in social media marketing and influencer marketing back when that was barely a thing, very unknown, and no one really knew what to make of it. But that's how I started at a startup. And from there, just went through all the positions and all the various spots you could possibly hold in digital marketing and then learn what is actually out there and what about digital is interesting to me. As I learned more and the more senior I got in my specific roles, I learned that it's not about the actual digital marketing campaigns that we ran or the ads that we run, but rather looking ahead and thinking, okay, what else is out there? What else is out there that we could actually do? And so innovation became more and more a real thing. And that's how I got where I am today.
So when you first started working in innovation, and it's possible like many of our industries, the nomenclature and the taxonomy evolves. So how do you define innovation now versus how you might have defined before?
Depending on who you ask, you always get a different answer. And innovation is so broad, right? But because I work at Publicis, which is a media agency, of course, I look through everything through the marketing and media lens. So for me, it's all about the content, the medium, the formats that we touch in our digital worlds that we engage in every single day. What are the technologies that sort of impact that? Where is a technology that actually causes a change in the content that we're consuming or creating? And so that's how I look at innovation and what it is. That covers my remit of innovation. So that's media at large, but that's also emerging technologies.
With emerging technologies, also like emerging experiences, new ways of creating that experience that might not have existed before. And that changes all the time. What has been surprising for you in this journey of yours and working in innovation and content and marketing?
There's so many surprises every single day. So I think the interesting part is because if you work in an agency, you work with different clients across the board, right? Different industries, different verticals every single day. And all of them have different interests and different needs. So every single day, there's a good chance that you have different tasks coming across your desk. Anything from can you explain what AI is to what are the imperatives for the automotive industry to here's a new creative idea. How can we use AR to bring that to life? So there's a whole range of things that you every single day encounter. And the best part about it is that you just every single day have to tackle new challenges and learn something new and then have the conversation about what is innovation and what does it mean to a client? Because innovation to us might mean one thing as far as emerging technologies, but we're very much at the forefront there and pioneering that. But when it comes to a good chunk of clients, that might actually be, okay, maybe we're talking about an AR filter on TikTok, right? Very different conversation. Bringing all the knowledge and the expertise to the clients, but then also having a conversation about, okay, what does it mean to you and where can we go and take this?
Yeah. How do you translate it to someone's business and their application, right?
For sure.
So emerging tech is like a catch-all term. And what is emerging in the moment will shift. When you and I first met, we were talking about the metaverse.
That's
And
right.
now we're talking and we've seen the cycle go from metaverse dialogue and even NFTs, right? Digital collectibles were at a peak at the moment. And now what we're seeing is more about AI, digital identities and digital twins, right? So I think the conversation is always shifting. So I'm curious, how do you nurture that curiosity and that innovator's mindset when you know that the space is shifting so often and you have to separate the signal and the noise?
For me personally, it's all about diving right in. You really have to test and learn for yourself. Biggest priority for me is understanding the technology by learning and by testing it yourself. So when there's a new platform, there's a new app, there's a new ChatGPT feature, whatever we're all crazy about, in the moment you have to dive in and figure it out. So either you can or you find someone else who can help you in that regard. But that's the best way to do it, right? You have to understand it first and foremost yourself before you can teach it to others or explain it to others and make sense of it. And then as you have maybe teams that you're leading or you're talking really to brands about what that means for them, it's about helping them also taking that first step and being open-minded about, hey, here's a new technology, but to your point, right, it's emerging. Meaning it's not mainstream yet. We don't have 15 years of history of data to take a proof point and showcase as to what it does or why it's useful, but it's important to know that it exists and where it may or may not be headed.
It's so spot on. I resonated with your point around when there is something happening, you have to dive in and try it out. I know when ChatGPT first came out, or even when we were exploring immersive experiences, that's all we were doing is, okay, what can we try? What can we play around with, mess around with so that we understand how to explain it to somebody else? I saw recently you used AI to convert one of your decks into a video to promote it. I really loved it. I was like, oh, this is so playful. And I think many organizations are trying to figure out how do we navigate AI right now. While AI has become an enabler in many ways, there are people who are at the tension between ethics and IP and creativity. So how are you as an organization addressing AI? Are you using it? Learning it,
all of it. Because the report that I created and then turned into that video or tried to turn into something else, it was a PDF. And of course you think, oh, you work in innovation, why are you sharing a PDF? That seems very old school and data. Shouldn't you think of something new, right? And the idea is, of course, the report itself is meant for people whose 9 to 5 is not to think about innovation, right? They're not the you and me of the world who think about emerging technology all day long, but the people who actually need to know a little bit more about the world because it's new to them. So for that reason, and because easy sharing of email is still very much going on, it makes it easier to share it around and for people to actually see it. So PDF all the way. But the idea is, of course, given all the various platforms from OpenAI to everything else that's out there, how can you actually use it? And so the idea is always to experiment and test and see what you can do. And for example, trend reports are a great example. So quite a few people collecting all the various reports that are currently buzzing around because it's that time of the year, and then creating GPTs, trend GPTs essentially, right? Loading the reports into ChatGPT to then make it a trend GPT, which I love. It's really awesome. Of course, the idea is, hey, why would I need to read all of it if I can just upload it GPT and then ask the question. But then when I tested quite a few of them out, the idea is actually if I share my PDF, it's easy for you to just open the doc and just scroll through and glimpse at all the content pieces, and you're being guided by whatever I share in that content piece. You are not being challenged to ask, okay, what is the trend? What do I need to look for? Because here is the answer. It's on the page. When you just upload to GPT, yes, you can provide a few prompts for the user to then be like, okay, what is the trend? Tell me, GPT, right? But the challenge is that you then still have to pose the question, okay, how does a user approach that? Because they will then have to ask the right questions. They can't ask, of course, hey, what is the newest trend? Tell me. And then GPT will list a whole lot of things. But will those be the right answers? You just don't know. So the challenge then becomes, okay, how do you prompt a GPT to make it useful? If you can't just throw a few pages out there with images and the right points in the upfront, how do you make sure that a user, when they're seeing your GPT, is actually asking the right question or gets the right answers? What we did, for example, I uploaded all of those trend support as well in my GPT, of course, including my own. But then you contextualize by asking, okay, for my own brands that I work on, can you sort this by brand or by industry? Give me context, or even by who are the partners and vendors that I work with who could actually help me introduce something like that to my brand? Or what is the competitive advantage? Like tease it out for me.
I saw Publicis GPT in the trend report. Is there a publicly accessible GPT where you've uploaded all these trend reports and we can go interact with it?
Yeah, it's not a publicly available one. Of course, ChatGPT, the way we all use it, that's publicly available. That's public information. You don't want to feed your sensitive information to the public or train the model on it. I think we all know that hopefully by now. No, but Publicis has its own GPT. So basically, we're just using a few models, the same that you would use in the public, but just limited to our needs specifically, and that public data doesn't blow out.
Yeah, and that makes sense because you want to be able to curate what information it leverages so that there is higher likelihood of accuracy to the data that you're providing, and then contextualizing it to the projects that you're working on that you may not want to be public.
It's a beautiful example for internal purposes. If you're working with your own teams, use external information, feed it up into your own models, and then train your own people on, or help them become better at the content and how to ask for those questions, or just use it as a great example, even if you want to showcase out the clients. Right here is a great example of how you can create something for your own needs without overcomplicating it, but just making it very, very useful.
So it sounds like you all are definitely using generative AI in your own work. How are you using it in the behind the scenes work versus work that gets put out into the world? I know every organization is kind of wrangling their own AI policies. Where are you all in that journey?
The one layer that I would add to that is that there's always conversation between, is it predictive AI or is it generative AI? Which one are we talking about? So in the ad space, we've used AI for the longest time already. Every single time you get an ad recommended and it's following you around on the internet, or Amazon is showing you something that you may or may not like, that's predictive AI, right? And so recommendations or just improving the ad performance, right? Which ad is performing better and potentially why? And then you build on top of that, right? So that has been around for quite some time and will always get better. The part where you use generative AI is much more interesting, much more nascent. For that reason, I think in the particular ad space, there will take still a little bit of time, right? Figuring out how to optimize your ad performance or your ad creative with the copy. I think there's ways to make that really efficient, but that's less interesting to me. I think the more interesting part is how can you actually use generative AI for a consumer experience, for example, helping your clients create a branded experience for their consumers to help them understand the brand better or add more context to how they're actually using product, for example. And the obvious use case I think that everyone is pointing to is the chatbots, right? Let's get rid of the old school chatbots that no one actually enjoys and likes to interact with, and instead add, for example, an AI agent, right? Or the co-pilot, and have that be your representation of the brand to then interact with the consumer and give a better interaction.
Right. And then you can control the tone and the brand of your AI personality, but then also give it a ton of information that is truthful to the brand, and the FAQ style, it would have a little bit more natural language style in that conversation potentially, right?
Ideally, you make sure that whatever interface you're choosing, if it's an avatar or not, speaks the brand language and the tone and voice and has it down to a T, and then personalize that experience to you, right? Ariba versus me, Jessica. How does the AI talk to me versus you, for example, in the context of what you're doing at that moment?
So the other thing I was curious about is how are you approaching educating the staff? I know you are part of the innovation team. You are an SVP of Innovation, but is it the only team that is getting familiar with this technology? Or is it the larger Publicis? How are you all approaching who dabbles in it, who uses it, and who learns it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it's always astonishing to me when people think because you're working at Publicis and it's a media agency, you must not have any AI experts or no technical experts that work or specialize in certain areas, right? The same, most people don't know that we have a head of gaming or a head of blockchain, for example, which is why it was very important for me in my report to actually include the people who have dedicated their careers to these expertise and subject matter experts or categories. And in the same way, we have lots of creative technologists. We have an army of people who focus on nothing else but actually the technology behind the scene. Mostly just lots of people who either are very familiar with technologies already, who have long-standing history in working in AI and actually done this before, or just lots of newcomers, hand raisers who want to learn, obviously, and want to understand new technology is because it's so important. And at this point, you can't go around of having to educate your entire organization. It would be amiss if you wouldn't share that information and give access to some degree so people can actually figure out how to use it and what to do with it, and educate them properly. Otherwise, they will likely do it whether or not you're going to educate them on it. So you're going to have to give them some pointers or give them access to some sort of tool to really help them in that regard.
Absolutely. And I think that's so right. It's already out of the box. Everyone has access to it. And so if you're not rallying around it to see this is how we are as an organization going to use it, this is how the guardrails we're going to follow, you just have an unknown amount of Pandora's box proliferating through your organization. To your point, knowing that there are so many others either curious about it or they're also working on it, but through a different lens, whether it's gaming or blockchain, and then rallying it together too.
We had our year recap meetings earlier this week. I think the number was still 100,000 people at work at this point at Publicis globally, right across agency. That's a massive amount of number of people. So imagine having, first of all, to wrangle all of that, but also making sure that everyone receives the same amount of information or access to tools and apps. So there's huge efforts going on behind the scene, of course, to help make that happen. But I'm very happy, first of all, that the agency is doing it in the way they're doing it. And then that we're able to actually help take that lesson learned and actually help our clients in the same way to make sure that they can transform either their needs or help them educate on what's needed and what their priorities are and how to integrate those.
So individually, just focusing on Jessica, how you use generative AI. So we've talked about you overall are an experimenter, right? I know you use that AI to make a video out of your PDF. How else are you incorporating generative AI into your workflows?
I use GPT every day, pretty much. You may have noticed English is not my first language. So in order just to write good copy, it's always a helpful tool. It's a great tool for thought starters, generally speaking, for strategy. That helps a lot. Because I'm also not a graphic designer, it's a helpful tool for any image generation needs. So along the lines of everything you could possibly need to replace having to design a PowerPoint from scratch or make it easier and faster in that regard. So couldn't do it without it.
I heard this one statement. He said, it helps me get off the blank page. That's exactly how I feel about any of these generative AI tools. I don't think I've ever shipped anything that was only created by AI. And I think it's always been something that either sparked some ideas. There's a lot of massaging going on between the GPT and myself or Claude, whatever tool I'm using. That phrase resonated so much with me. It was like just getting off the blank page.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different tools out there. You really have to obviously consider what do you do on a daily basis, what's most helpful to you, and what are you comfortable using, to what degree, right? Not everyone wants to be out there and dabbling into Stable Diffusion and really maybe Jasper.io is everything they need to just rewrite some copy. I do remember the days where you still had to ping your graphic designers or you had to ping someone else who knew how to use a tool platform in order to help you create a new cool image or like Photoshop something real quick. In the meantime, I had learned them, but nowadays you can literally just type it in. And that's such an interesting new development overall, I think, where you're simply taking away the hurdles, the challenges of having to navigate complexities and you're just getting to the result in a faster way. I think that's the most interesting thing.
Sometimes it's even just a prototypic image, right? Sometimes you just need a concept to be able to articulate a point. And instead of taking someone else's time where they're working on something that's a little bit more high priority, you can use a tool like these to get something on paper to get your point across in a deck. So given the timing, let's dive right into the trend report. For the listeners, I will definitely be linking it in the show notes so people can download it and they can spend their time going through all the trends. You and your team created this trend report called Future Forward 2024. One of my favorite parts of trend reports is always the beginning, the vision statements of that letter to the reader. I don't know why, but it casts such a beautiful statement to start with. And yours said Web3 has emerged as the harmonizer for XR, blockchain, and AI technologies. It is shaping a new era in consumer experiences characterized by heightened immersion, decentralization, and intelligence. Like, that was such an energizing statement for me. And then there were the 4 trends that the report dives into that really supports that vision. So through this conversation, we'll cast a high-level definition of the 4, but we'll dive into 2 of them. And I think through that conversation, we'll be able to paint the picture of why this vision statement is what you guys printed.
Like the name said, is more than just ads. We actually focus heavily on content. So think about all the branded content opportunities you see on Netflix, streaming platforms, anywhere else other than your typical display ad or programmatic Facebook ad, whatever. And then innovation, using emerging technologies, hence all of the various categories, all the way into gaming. Quite a few categories to cover, but yeah, we nailed it down to sort of 4 main trends, you can call them. Certainly, there's a huge debate going on what is a trend anyway these days, but we're calling them trends, but at least like directions that are important for us to digest and that I felt were important to call out for people to understand, because that is what we're seeing is currently actually changing. And really there is something happening where people are just interacting with the content differently. One, right, to your point, is instant content commerce opportunities. And I call that out because, well, we're all on our phones every single day on social media. Live streams have become a thing. Streaming has become a thing. It's an uptick because everything else is just not as important anymore because we're just using so many devices at the same time anyway. But the opportunity to integrate, of course, from a brand perspective, right, and being at an agency, integrating your content into any sort of streaming opportunity. Think about all the TikTok live streams you've ever been on or Instagram live streams that we're not so accustomed to. And think about all of the opportunities where you're seeing people actually selling you things in those live streams, or the subscription models that have popped up, right? So anywhere between there's a Netflix of the world and subscription models, that's where really media and advertising is living. So that was a big one for us to call out. And then these are obvious as a second is the immersive spaces that are just constantly are top of mind for us. And yes, that's Roblox and Fortnite and many others. Most importantly, driven by sort of the development of headsets. And we see that Vision Pro being released hopefully early in the spring, or if not earlier. So we see something like early as January, or at least somewhere in the spring. So that's digital ecosystem. Then we see AI being a huge topic. And I know we can dive into that even more as we have. But the biggest thing there to call out, I think, was you can call it a trend, but Meta, for example, released during Facebook Connect recently the concept of their AI personas, right? Where you actually create a social profile that isn't actually you, but your AI persona of you, where that may or may not be headed. And then finally, gaming is a huge aspect for us, of course, because gaming is no longer just gaming the way we once knew it, but it has really evolved in so many different avenues. Yeah. So 4 categories that sort of overarch that, and then we'll go into details in the report.
Thank you so much for casting that overarching theme. I want to go back to your statement earlier about what is a trend these days anyway. And so in a world where we are inundated with content everywhere we turn, and you said we're kind of in the season for trend reports anyway, how are you identifying trends or separating the signal from the noise? I also recognize you use the language direction.
I'm open to debating what is a trend and whether or not we want to use it in this context. It makes it easier because when I say trend report, people understand what it is that I'm trying
to
do.
Expectation.
It makes it easy. Of course, there is this debate going on, like, yeah, in the world we're hyping so much, especially when it comes to emerging technology anyway. We're consuming so much content every single day already, when everyone, especially in our little industry anyway, we're talking about emerging technology all day long. Everyone was talking about metaverse, NFTs, and where it all is headed. You know, pointing it out in the report seemed redundant. Making it a trend may not be what you and I would consider a trend. So there is debate going on. You could take that either way. But for me, it was important just to not go too deep into each category and make it a for sure guaranteed, predicted, like, here is what we're saying is going to happen in 2024 or beyond. But it was important for us to call out, here are the things that we're just seeing consistently pop up, things that we're seeing investments being made in. Think about the headset, they're not going away. They're going to happen. Are they going to go mainstream? Maybe not. But they will be important for the development and the evolution of that direction. So it was important to do that. And then again, I wanted to include all the people who actually work behind the scenes, who have many, many years and decades of experience in the field of entertainment and media, who really understand the space and who are, to me, even more important and have much more value to bring to this report than any insights reports or any forecasting models that we could have used instead.
Yeah, I actually really appreciated that, because I think, to your point, at least for me right now, what I'm looking for is less of a predictive per se and more of what are the observations that we can pause and notice and just call out to see what may transcend into the next year or not. But these are the signals of the behaviors that we're seeing around us, right? So that was one of the reasons I really enjoyed reading the report and the vision statements, obviously. So diving into the first one that really caught my eye, the instant content to commerce technology, right? So you defined it as the live stream economy. And that is something that's a new thing that's been happening, where the feature of going live has existed across a few different platforms, right? Like YouTube, Instagram, Amazon. I can't even remember what else. TikTok, you can go live on. The option to monetize it, though, has become a newer concept. And I think you pointed out people's shopping habits have also evolved, where I've noticed even my shopping habits have evolved, where I might watch something and they say, oh, link in bio. I'm like, oh, great. Let me just go to your list. I'm going to see this curated list and I want to buy from that, right? It's like this vetting process. And then I'm like, who is this person that I'm taking their recommendation from? I'm like, so tell us a little bit more about this trend.
There's two layers to it. One is the rise in creator economy. Everyone's an influencer. Everyone is a content creator, or at least has the opportunity to do so.
I mean, we're creating it right now, right?
As we speak. And I'm sure at some point in time, you would want to run ads or sponsor content or somehow make use of your channels and your platforms, monetize that. I'm sure you're going to do that successfully. But that's the point, right? On TikTok, anyone can create content, upload it really, really easily. And then if they're doing it often enough and have all the resources in place, they can also link their Amazon storefront. And that's how we all shop these days. Social commerce is a huge thing. And the same goes with Instagram ads, right? Like, when's the last time you haven't seen an ad, or how many times you actually fall for these ads and you're actually going for it and shopping through the sponsored content that you're seeing? That's quite a bit. So that's one thing, right? Creator economy isn't going away. It's on the rise. If anything, it's more diversified than ever. We're seeing more and more smaller creators actually making use of it and monetizing their content, their everyday life, or their 9 to 5, or the time after their 9 to 5. And so you can really see that being an opportunity for brands to also then go deeper into the micro influencers, or just integrating themselves less as a brand, but more as an opportunity to also help fuel that creator economy in whichever way possible. And yes, platforms like TikTok, for example, have actually introduced subscription models, which is very interesting, because not everyone is willing to see ads all day long, of course, right? Like, we're seeing more and more platforms actually introducing ad-free options. So how do you still get in front of the audience? That's a huge opportunity for brands to introduce new content or branded opportunities in that regard. And then yes, there's social live streamers that's selling you content or a product by the second or by the minute, just by showing you something and giving you the opportunity to shop later or shop in the link. So that's a huge opportunity. And same goes for any streaming platforms, for example, like the Twitch of the world or the Netflix of the world. There's lots of opportunity to think about original content, branded content opportunity. If you've ever seen a brand name pop up in one of your favorite series, then you know it's branded, likely. But it's done in a less intrusive way. And so there's better and more opportunities that we're seeing that actually pop up in that regard.
It's so interesting that as consumers, we've become more open to it too. I think there once was an era where it felt more of an interruption versus now things have become so much more integrated because of user-generated content, creator economy. And plus, I think brands are blurring the lines a little bit more and thinking about what type of content will users actually resonate more with. So we're seeing that as well. I'm curious in terms of ethical considerations or just concerns that come up, right? For me, immediately, I think about hyper-consumerism. I think about, I've definitely gone through lists of like Amazon must-haves. I'm like, wait, do I need that? What are some considerations you would want anyone to keep in mind as they're building to leverage this trend?
The de-influencing trend is there for a reason. I think it's showing, just generally speaking, where we as a consumer are paying more and more attention to, and that is the hyper consumerism. Same on the brand side. Of course, no one likes more ads. That is, I think, universally understood. So how can we make that more seamless, more integrated? That is a big question. I think the opportunity lies also in the way we're sharing the formats or how we're integrating it. Think about your favorite TV show that's running on Netflix or Hulu, whichever program you like, Amazon Prime, but like giving people the option rather than having to shove it into their faces, so to speak. Giving them the option to, hey, if you really like something you see while it's streaming, yes, you can click pause. And if you would like to click pause, maybe you would also like to purchase, but maybe you don't like it. So maybe let's just move on with the movie or your favorite series. I think that's sort of the way we're going, but just being more creative about that and more mindful.
That makes sense. And I think I could also see, as we keep going that direction, having something like an in, right? When you're setting up your Netflix account and being able to say, do not show me recommendations because I have an addiction, or I'm trying to consume less, right? Whatever that might be. Because I think we are seeing more and more opt-in and opt-out mechanisms happen. And I love that. I think people need to be more informed about those dynamics at play. So I think that would also be interesting to see. I saw this thing about choose your own adventure and your purchase. Was there anything else you wanted to add from that example?
The choose your own adventure is a creative hint or nod at the way we're looking at media formats, especially as with more virtual try-on, for example. Because to the point of if no one likes more ads, how about we make the ads just more interactive and more useful? I'm a very practical person. I like to shop things that I can use or that I can preview to some degree and that actually give me a reassurance that what I'm purchasing is actually something that I want and need and that will ultimately fit me if we're talking about glasses or if we're talking about fashion, for example. And that's a huge opportunity I think not a lot of brands have really discovered yet or aren't fully using. And I always like to say, like, we'll point back to Amazon Prime Deal Day, right? They have this huge opportunity like on Amazon already. They're using Amazon Lens with essentially virtual try-on or at least 3D preview of the object that you're buying, the product. So you can actually preview the toaster that you're about to buy and how would it look in your kitchen corner. Or whatever you're trying on, how would the sunglasses look on your face? Leveraging that a lot more is an opportunity that I would recommend to any brand. And if you still have not created your 3D files of your inventory, I would highly recommend to do that because that's what we're seeing happening a lot more, right? Google has already integrated that in their actual shopping search. If you're shopping for sneakers or anything like that, you actually have the opportunity to see them in 3D now. And that is something we're seeing more and more. And most brands and clients are, I think, surprised when they come to find out, like, oh, you can actually virtual try on as something you can integrate in a website. You can embed that as people are on the website shopping and you can actually add a click to shop into it to make that very, very easy and seamless. So I think there's lots more opportunity there to really dive into what that could do and what the quality of that looks like.
I love that, especially from all the angles that you're saying, but also the accessibility part of it too, right? We saw during the pandemic, so many D2C brands boom because people wanted to just buy their things from the internet because that was the only option that we had. And then now I think with virtual try-ons, there are people who are still not able to go out that much, whether they have chronic illnesses or they have a physical or mobility disability, or you're a mom who needs to be home tethered to this child all the time.
In my case, I don't even like shopping malls all that much.
Yeah.
In the US, they're kind of terrible, right? The experience is not that great. And so oftentimes we go to the mall maybe for fun and we window shop a little bit or we browse around. But ultimately we go home because we want to take care of it and use all the discounts we have and get all the points on whatever or not you're collecting, right? And that's typically what happens. We're seeing more and more, right? People still love the real life experience. Of course, going shopping will never go away in that regard, but just being more creative about how you can present a product. I think there's so much more opportunity. And especially if you're thinking really about immersive experiences, right? If you're talking bigger brand experiences of how you just drive awareness to your product, that's such an underutilized area and totally from a virtual try-on perspective. Using all the avatars and the digital humans that are out there in all games and all the social environments, you could actually get really, really creative. And I have not seen a lot of brands actually dive into that.
Hopefully people that are listening are going to experiment. One question I had that I never thought about until this conversation is when you do virtual try-ons and it scans like the space or it scans my body in order to layer it, it's getting access through my camera and it's scanning. Is that data stored and then accessed later on? Because then I'm thinking about data privacy. People who might not realize this virtual try-on is storing that data so they're getting in front of it naked.
I think that probably, I can't speak for every platform. Everyone does it differently. Most of the time, they give you a little window pop-up that says, hey, we're tracking the data right now for the use of you trying it on, but afterwards it will be deleted. So most people are deleting it, yes. You, of course, have to opt in into the experience. So that is completely up to you, whether or not you're comfortable with that and you trust that that is actually happening. There is a better question of like who actually follows up on that. But yeah, generally speaking, they will delete the information.
I haven't used too many of the try-on technologies. They sometimes don't work for me. It's a little glitchy, but I think to your point, the technology is going to keep evolving, but I will definitely make a note to notice what the language is around the
I'm a huge fan and I can see the quality evolving already, which is...
Do you have a favorite?
I always recommend, if you're comfortable furniture shopping, go to the good old IKEA app, for example.
Yeah.
Or any good store that is selling you a rug will likely have a virtual feature where you can place the rug in your place. Or if you go to Shein, for example, right now, they have a beautiful beautiful opportunity to really try on all of the clothing items.
So shifting into the AI at the crossroads of identity and social life trend, tell us more about that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one that's highly evolving. It's kind of based around the idea that, one, we're already seeing so many prototypes or use cases where brands have tried or platforms have tried to use NPCs, so non-playable characters or avatars to some degree, to make them more interactive and infuse some AI in order to make the conversation more interesting while you're gaming and while you're interacting with them. So it's one part where I'm thinking, that will definitely evolve and we'll see more of. So as you're thinking about all the games that are coming out or all the new interaction points where you are in Roblox, for example, or in Fortnite, right? Why wouldn't you want to play as an NPC or an avatar or use your character in order to have it be more engaging? That's one part. And then the interesting part we're seeing from many companies like the Snap or Meta pop up is the idea around AI humans, essentially, right? Replicating a digital twin of yourself so that whoever is interacting on social media will always have an opportunity to interact with you, no matter the time of the day, because there's an AI digital twin or persona of yourself available 24/7. So that's the really interesting part. Like when you are on social media, and we all are to some degree on whichever platform, to think about who are you interacting with. The concept is not new. I think the question we always had is someone catfishing us? Is someone on the other side acting who they are if you're not seeing them in a video call like this? But no more so than ever, right? If you're interacting with an avatar, if you're interacting with a virtual human, is that the person that you're talking to, or is it just a virtual human that is AI driven? And to what degree are we comfortable with that? There's many questions around that, but that's something that we're seeing and I'm very, very interested to see evolve.
It's such a great point because I remember when chatbots were the rage and everyone wanted to create a chatbot, and some of the chatbots were formulated kind of FAQ style, and some of the chatbots were more a little bit of a choose your own adventure type style. And now what we're seeing is with AI generated utility, we're going to see a lot of shifts in that, right? And to your point, how human do we need that experience to be? Human as in, do we need it to be generative? Or are people going to be like, I don't know what this is, but can you just get me a representative?
The hope is that those old school, terrible chatbot interactions will become obsolete and we'll replace them with actually something functional, conversational, that is actually working and giving us the result that we're looking for. So we don't have to call into the screen, please give me a representative. But the idea is also how transparent are brands or people in that regard, right? We saw that example from celebrities, right? Like if you have Snoop Dogg AI human, so to speak, in front of you and you're interacting with that on social media, are you aware that it is not Snoop Dogg? And are you comfortable with that? And what is Snoop Dogg AI sharing versus does Snoop Dogg know that there is an AI sharing something about him? And is he comfortable with that?
Part. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to bring up, because I think now it makes me wonder, when you are creating this digital AI powered persona, people are going to take information that's available on the internet, whether it's Snoop Dogg's script, right? Taking what he says and then infusing it for his tone. But at what point do you need permission to use his likeness, right? I saw two examples. I saw one where, I don't know if you know her, Sinead Bovell. She's an incredible futurist and technologist, but I saw her talk about it in her TikTok. And she talked about how an AI persona was created in her likeness and uses all of the content she's created as information for that. And I was like, oh my goodness, there she is putting her heart and soul into her content. And then this AI was fed that so that someone can interact with it and it would say the same things, right? Similar things. And in her likeness.
Who's giving the permission? And then tying it. Let me tie this back as to why I made that introduction and the upfront of the report about Web3, right? The next iteration of the internet and why it's coming together with the foundation of mixed reality. So XR, AR, VR, and augmented reality. And we're talking about artificial intelligence and the proliferation of blockchain technologies, all of that enabling sort of Web3 altogether. Because if you think about it, wouldn't it be great if there was a way to verify and to acknowledge whether or not something is real or not? Blockchain experiences make that happen for us, and a wonderful opportunity to actually solve for that. So I don't think we're going to ever be able to move ahead and think everything is going to be real or everything is going to be verifiable on the internet, but understanding that there are solutions that we could implement or work towards, like blockchain technologies, to actually, ensure that there is secure and transparent information sharing going on without having the fear that every bit of euro is a deep fake or not every persona is not actually real.
I think the nexus that we are at right now, because all these questions are being raised and people want to know, how do we solve for this? Because we're seeing it, right? None of this is going to slow down, but these questions are at the nexus and we're trying to figure out, in order for more people and more brands and more people to use them and more brands to use them, but then also more people to trust, to even feel confident that they know what to trust, right? I think that is really essential here in order for brand success.
And to be clear, I think there's lots of opportunity in using these digital twins, right? I think there is a use case for it. I don't think we're there yet to hand them over to the world and mainstream media or everyone in the hopes that everyone is using them in the right way. I think there will always be bad actors who will figure out how to not use them in the right way. But I think there is something interesting there where you can actually think, yeah, it makes sense to have a digital twin, right? If you think about all the work, every meeting ever where you felt like I don't need to be here, someone else can do the prep call or whatever it is. It makes a lot of sense. Or if you think about all the opportunities where you want to engage as a celebrity or an influencer with your audience globally, but they're all speaking different languages, how do you manage that at scale? Or branded opportunities, of course, from a media perspective, it makes a lot of sense. Whether or not it's going to replace anyone, I don't think so, of course, but there's still a little bit of work to be done as far as figuring out what that means for transparency.
You brought up celebrities, right? One example was exactly what you're saying. If a celebrity or an artist has to engage a global audience, like what are some other reasons that this is actually advantageous for people?
From a brand perspective, it makes sense to be more personal or appear more personal and to have it be a highly personalized experience. If you are interacting with the Samsung AI on Facebook and it's a really interesting, intimate conversation and you're actually getting the content that you're looking for rather than the old school chat experience, I think there is a use case there and to make it really interesting. Or if you actually feel like you want to talk to a therapist or you feel like you want to talk to your nutritionist, everyone who has a career in some degree can probably say, oh, there is a certain chunk of my work that I want to outsource because it's mundane or it's the same over and over again. And the same way that we're sending out emails with like, here is your intake form, please fill out the whatever questions. Having that co-pilot and the companion experience available to your audience for whichever need, whether or not it's just a fan base because you're a celebrity or because your customer and someone is your dentist and you just want to check in on, okay, is everything going well, right? Just a regular routine check-ins. Those kind of scenarios I can see work really, really well.
What we're already seeing is, like you said, nutrition, fitness. I think I've seen some examples there where there's an AI tool that is already fed a lot of information and you can kind of utilize it and engage with it so it can give you recommendations for nutrition, for a specific diet. You can tell it, I'm keto or I'm gluten-free, and it can give you nutritional guidance or recipes and menus and such. And I know we're seeing a similar type of application of AI in many other industries, including financial advisory, right? And I think a lot of these tools are behind a paywall, right? They're not free because these businesses want to make money. So I think what we're also going to start seeing is an increase of a gap between people who can afford access to these tools that are more efficient, more productive, all of these things versus people who can't afford that luxury of, yes, I don't have the time to read 30 articles about how to count my macronutrients. So I'm going to use this AI tool and pay for it versus everyone else who's like, I can't pay for that. So I'm going to have to go the other way. So I think we might see the gap exist there between people who are leveraging these tools and people who are not.
Yeah, the other day talking with someone about a different scenario, and I'll play here, where everyone who doesn't or isn't able to afford access to a real person, to like your real therapist, has to deal with sort of the lower base. And that is just your AI version of that, right? Where you get sort of the basic needs covered and then ultimately you can upgrade or subscribe and then you get access to the real person. Being real has this luxury notion, I think, in a world where everything is AI enhanced at the very least, right? This is obviously a concept that is more a couple of years out. We're talking here, not necessarily today or tomorrow, but in a world where lots of content is already AI generated or at least enhanced to some degree today, we're not actually writing all of the social media content. 75% of what you're seeing on a daily is probably already enhanced to some degree.
So I know that there's also AI enhanced audio creation and song creations and all of that. Do you think we're walking into a new era where creators and artists are going to, maybe it's already happening, like how do they own their likenesses, right? Like we saw the viral AI generated Drake song happen, right? Where everyone kept on talking about it and then it was taken off. I think it was on Spotify and then it got taken down, or YouTube. That technology already exists. How do creators take back some power power or get royalty? I think that's the next question there too, right?
And I think, yet again, blockchain seems to be a very interesting solution to that problem, isn't it? Right? When you can
to
actually
prove ownership.
For example, Google, for example, right? They have their platform already available where you can mix and match or get your stems for music, right? And you can actually create something. And there's many other platforms currently popping up on the internet where you can actually remix your own music. Whether or not that is legal is a different story. And I think there is still a lot of debate happening. In a lot of cases, it's not. But the idea, I think, would be interesting to explore of using blockchain technology in order to enable like fair and authentic and real role sharing, for example. Making sure everyone gets paid who has been involved and making sure that everyone gets their fair share. So again, just a good example where the next iteration of the internet, where Web3 can have a lot of new components that we just haven't seen yet as far as content consumption, creation, and just earning what you're actually producing.
Yeah. So how far are we from that, though? You've said this a few times that blockchain can help us prove the authenticity, the truth, as well as make sure that it's distributing royalties and funds equitably so the people who are the creators can benefit from that.
I think it's in the works. I've seen it being explored already. I know there's a lot of startups that are currently focusing on that. The part that people need to keep in mind, there was a lot of funding throughout early 2021 while all the hype was happening. A lot of funding occurred in the Web3 startup space, but building a company, I'm sure you are well aware, it takes a lot of time. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but products need to be developed and that doesn't happen overnight. So if you consider the funding that happened, I don't know, 2 years ago, building a company in that current frame, like actually building a product and go to market strategy and making sure that everything is working, you're not going to get to see the results until like, I don't know, 5 years from now. But in 5 years, there is a good chance that lots of new platforms and apps and opportunities are popping up where we're all of a sudden saying, oh, why wasn't that available, previously? Or where does that come from? Well, yeah, because all of the startups are currently still building. But I think it's definitely happening and I'm giving it a very optimistic chance to actually becoming true.
Okay, so let's bring it home. I'm going to share a few rapid fire questions. Jessica, how are you nurturing your mental health these days?
I don't recommend it to everyone, but I am one of the 5 o'clock in the morning people who gets to the gym very early, gets it out of the way, and then moves on with their day. But it helps a lot.
When do you go to sleep?
On a good day, anywhere between 9 and 10.
Okay.
I drink a lot of coffee to balance it out. I don't recommend getting up early. It's not for everyone, but I started doing it 2 years ago. It's stuck. I know I can't shake it, even if I, don't set my alarm, but it helps a lot. It just gives you a lot of freedom in the morning. It's true what everyone is saying. Like it's just quiet in the morning. If you are the kind of person, I'm the introvert, right? I like to charge up in the morning, get my coffee in, go work out. It helps tremendously just to free up space. And then you have the rest of the day to actually focus on the work ahead.
I mean, you essentially start your day by pouring into your cup first before giving to your work or anything else, right?
Yeah. And then whatever happening can just come and you're still good. You got your workout and no worries.
How do you nurture your curiosity?
Constantly learning. I mean, I do that on a daily basis for my job anyway, but I do like to travel, for example. I'm definitely that person. Also, not just learning new, but curiosity by just revisiting lots of old stuff that you may have forgotten. Because we consume so much content, right? Lots of media and lots of just knowledge and expertise, but we also get a lot. So sometimes just like looking back in an old book or like looking back in old notes and remembering, okay, what did I do earlier this year? I don't know. Like a lot of times we don't even remember. So looking back and remembering a lot of things.
Who is up next? Who are some people that listeners can follow along or learn from?
Yeah, there's a lot of people. I highly recommend you follow along if you're curious in the media space and you have not seen yet Rashad Kuala. Definitely lots of great strategy and innovation thinking as we're looking to what's next. There's also other people, Ali Muller, for example, who is big in the AI space and she has a lot of great wisdom. So, or Shanab Bowl that you mentioned, she is wonderful.
I love that list and we'll definitely include it in the show notes so people can find them. And then I know we talked about a lot of different topics, but I think focusing mostly on the 2 trends we hyper-focused on, the content to commerce and the AI being at the crossroads of identity and social life. Like, what do you think is up next for those directions?
I think what we're going to see is just more seamless content creation. And I think people need to understand that we're all consuming or creating content. It's one or the other. It's not going to go away. So less ads in the traditional way, but more opportunities to seamless connect lots of opportunities to talk about something, create something, sell you something, but also like, hey, let's debate whether or not it was useful or not. But like have it be more a seamless opportunity to really integrate content. And then generally speaking, I mean, the technologies will evolve and then we're definitely going to have to revisit and reflect in a year whether or not there's actually pan out the way we thought they did.
I feel like 2024, December, we can regroup and talk about, so what did happen?
I would love that.
Well,
Sure.
thank you so much, Jessica, for joining us today, for having this conversation. I had a blast.
Oh, thank you so much. This is great. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this conversation today. If you liked what you heard, be sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify to help more people discover the show. Really appreciate you joining us today. And be sure to hit subscribe, leave a comment, and come back next week so we can keep exploring what's up next in tech and shape our collective future together. Until then, stay curious.